Hello, my name is David Tavares. I'm an Unreal Engine 5 independent game designer, and today I would like to talk to you about design docs, specifically the design doc that I created for Sea of Time, which is a CRPG created on Unreal Engine 5, which was recently accepted into the Unbound program for World of Darkness. If you're not familiar with what the Unbound program is, it's sort of like a semi-open license where you're allowed to build games set in the universe of World of Darkness, more specifically, or more likely Vampire the Masquerade 5th Edition. I know they're going to be opening up further sub-games there as well. Um, but I'm going to walk you through what Sea of Time is, and what the design document I created for it was. So here you can see in this page, this is the Unbound page. If I click on Sea of Time created by David Tavares, you'll see the itch.io link for Sea of Time. Now there's a description of the game you can find here. You get some screenshots of what's happening in the game as well. And of course down here there's like my Patreon and ways to support me. But before I created all this, I needed a plan. Um, so I created this design doc. Um, this document covers many things, including the systems, core pillars of designing this game, who the team is, um, what the story is, the style of the game, the controls, uh, target technological requirements, the general flow chart of the core gameplay loop, um, diagrams of like the HUD systems and interfaces, the player experience. Then I showed some character metrics, the scope of the game, a production plan. Then I went into things like for pitching, like the budget estimates, um, foreseeable risks, a non-exhaustive list there, and then did my own little Q&A there. So the overview, I'm going to walk you through this, but I'll also link it in the description. What is Sea of Time? It's a CRPG adventure game set in Gothic urban fantasy. So I like the way to describe it is urban gothic versus something um like neo noir or something like that. I prefer the angle of Vampire the Masquerade to be um you really feel that there's like echoes through time. That's why it's called Sea of Time. So this is going to be this design doc was built with the idea that this was going to be pitched towards a specific IP holder that wasn't my own original copy. I am building another design document, which I hope to make another video for one of my own original IPs. However, this one, it's a gothic horror CRPG where you play as a group of vampires from rival factions throughout the ages to unravel an ancient conspiracy. You create a lasting legacy, or you can hoard the power of the blood for a highly replayable story with multiple paths and endings. Now, that might be a bit confusing, which is why there is many other pages to this document to explain what it is. Um, I wrote here that it's Baldur's Gate 3 meets Darkest Dungeon in the Vampire Masquerade setting. Maybe I should have taken out the Darkest Dungeon spot, because that's a less well-known game. Baldur's Gate 3 was a less well-known game until recently, and it blew up as possibly one of the best games ever. I wrote this back when Baldur's Gate 3 was in early access. So effectively, it's Baldur's Gate, but instead of Dungeons and Dragons, I made it Vampire the Masquerade setting. That's the intent. I have nowhere near the resources that Larian Studio has when they created Baldur's Gate. There are some effects that I wanted to have, which is the reason I threw Darkest Dungeon in there. Not only the mood and theme would feel appropriate, but also like I want it so that you can lose a character and just continue on and feel like you're still continuing your story. And that's something that happens in Darkest Dungeons. You can do that in Baldur's Gate 3 too, but then you lose a lot of the core story when you actually lose a character for good. But many people's playthrough, they do skip a lot of characters, if you're familiar with that game. So I answered who is this game for, the target demographics, making sure that this is known as a mature game, like a Peggy 18 maybe, other equivalents. Target demographics: fans of World of Darkness, of course, CRPG lovers, um, alternate history buffs, because this is supposed to be adventures through time as well. So people that are interested in history or alternate histories, people that just love rich narrative lores. I knew that was Drew and a whole bunch of people that no one expected to like Baldur's Gate 3. Um, and of course, Gothic horror aficionados, because I want to have a lot of horror elements in the game. What's the Sea of Time about? Um, well, players will create their own party. So unlike Baldur's Gate 3, where usually most of your party are pre-generated characters, um, there will be signature characters in the world, but the player is free to create their own whole party themselves for single player with this game. They can achieve their objectives. With friends multiplayer, they can build their own characters as well. Or solo play. They can explore, combat, have dialogue. This is a narrative-rich game. The percentage of combat to dialogue would be very similar to that of Baldur's Gate. Innovative systems. So I'm not just making a skinned Baldur's Gate 3 to be Vampire the Masquerade themed. However, I want these planned systems, what I call the Agora system. So I want dialogue and combat not to be completely separate systems, but to be intermixed. You can end a combat through using dialogue in combat. Like, hey, you've lost enough of your friends already. Are you sure you want to fight to the death? Things like that. Or vice versa. It's pretty common to say something to get someone into combat, but um, uh, there's a system in World of Darkness where Vampire the Masquerade comes from, where like insults can hurt someone's willpower. So maybe you're not like quite fists yet, but you're slinging insults at each other. Um, and another aspect to that could just be like intimidation, bluffing. All these things should not stop just because people are fighting. Everyone just doesn't go tight-lipped as soon as the brawl breaks out. So especially among vampires who have an extra layer of cruelty within from the beast within them. Um, and vampires also, can usually take a punch. So takes more than one punch to take out usually, unless they're really strong. Um, so social and physical just intermix. Uh, So I also want to create a system I call my cinematic conflict system, which is integral to the Agora system, in which instead of just every player just taking their turn, like, oh, it's my turn, I get to go, and everything else is basically frozen in time, where all of that is thematic itself. I'm sure there'll be some frozen in time powers. Um, the cinematic conflict system is a last in, first out thing. So everyone says what they're going to do, with the slowest person choosing first. That way, people can see what they're trying to do and react to it. So instead of just reacting once it actually happens, you get to say, well, they're slower than me, so I can clearly see they're trying to do that. So since I'm quicker, I'm going to react first. So um, everyone decides what they do, and then the camera will just pan around and show everyone executing the results of whatever their action was, whether it succeeded, whether it failed, whether there was a bestial failure or, some sort of exceptional success. Whatever happens as the result of the die rolls, um, there will be a cinematic conflict resolved, and the camera will pan around, make it like a little mini movie every round. Instead of everyone just all going and just be like walk up, stab, you'll see a cool. It's almost like a cutscene, but it'll be live in real time. I've already experimented with this, and I'm very happy with the results. Um, so in a way, it's like a new. I've never seen anything like this before. Hybrid of real time and turn based. So it is turn based, but it looks real time when it actually executes at once everyone chooses what they do for the round. Uh, and the legacy system. Uh, Not to be confused with a legacy system, something from the past, but you get to build your own legacy. And this is takes place during four different eras. Like a Bronze Age, medieval period, Renaissance, and modern age. So instead of just always necessarily playing the same vampire, you can and go down the edges, or you can sire a child. That's where you create, your own line of vampires, um, and you can play the child instead, and that will benefit you because as the sea of time wears on, you kind of fall back into the past, and maybe it's better for you to be a patron and help your children instead of doing everything yourself and just letting the blood take you over. And they'll be closer to humanity as well, since they're from a closer age to now. You might have even made them recently. Now weaker though, but what's more important? And that'll be a common theme: power or your connection with humanity. Lots of details here. I go through in the core gameplay loop, where it's like a standard RPG. You collect objectives, battle, explore, outwit via dialogue, earn experience point, find loot. So experience points aren't gained in this type of game by killing monsters. You gain experience by completing set objectives. So if you find a way to not slaughter everything, you might actually get more experience than if you just murder everything in the dungeon. Um, and the major loop is creating the characters, attempting to achieve their personal goals, which you get to select. If you check out that's already available on the itch.io page. If you want to see the types of personal objectives you can have for your character, that's in there. So it's almost like a build your own Baldur's Gate 3 signature character, if you're familiar, if you know what that means. So you get to choose their motivations, and the goal is to so that there's internal dialogue even between the characters. Even in multiplayer, you can have a romance with the other characters in multiplayer if both characters agree to it by speaking it in dialogue. Um, Pillars of Sea of Time: commitment to the brand. So Vampire the Masquerade is a very strong brand. It's a very specific brand. It can mean a lot of things. True. Um, there are like dating simulators, and there's tactical games, card games, of course, other RPGs of various sorts. But there is an unmistakable brand of Vampire the Masquerade that I want to make sure that the fans recognize and stays true to that, including the lore and the immersion of the world. Meaningful gravity. I want choices to feel impactful. I don't want it just to be like, score a bunch of points, gain the abilities, finish the game. I want the characters to be invested in the story. It is going to be a narrative first game. Intrigue and mystery. There is a lot of mystery already baked into the Vampire the Masquerade lore. The mystery of what the ancient game that's being played between the elders. It's going to be written in a way where it's going to be difficult to completely spoil the end of the story because there's going to be a lot of mystery at the end, but you'll still learn quite a bit. This game is designed narratively around the idea that fan theories strengthen the overall community. And here I went over the Paradox pillar since they're the license holder. Um, Looks good, plays perfect. At least these were the Paradox pillars at the time. I don't know if they've changed since then. This was written about a year ago. Offers an endless experience, so it is a very replayable game. Challenges the minds. Yeah, there's a lot of tactics, a lot of wordplay. Um, Very perfect for challenging the mind. Gives agencies to the player. That's very important to me as well. Character customization. You even get to choose your motivation. Um, Motivations can range greatly from Maybe you want to destroy the city that you're in. There's different ages, so you can just decide this city needs to burn. That can be your motivation. Your motivation could be to protect all humanity, make sure almost nobody dies. The exact opposite. Your motivation can be like, I want this faction to win, and there are several factions in every age that you can side with. Your motivation might be, I support this religion and I want to spread it as much as possible by any means necessary. So there might be some violence involved in that, some persuasion, some dealings. I mean, it depends on the exact vampire religion that you're part of. Tons of agency. Invites a deeper dive, depth and endless engagement. Practically just by putting Vampire the Masquerade as an actual true theme to a game. I believe that's one of the deepest IPs that there's ever been. Um, and yeah, there's going to be tons and tons and tons that I'm adding to the lore here. Um, that builds upon existing lore. Um, Occupational Hazard LLC, my company. Mission to bring our imaginations to life in a way that is meaningful to our games as players. Vision. Our library of games will tell stories that respects the player's agency. That aligns perfectly with what Paradox wants to do. I kind of really like them as a publisher. They're not our publishers, but they're amazing. Um, Values integrity, cooperation, and excellence. Um, these value. I used to be in the U.S. Air Force. It was always integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. So I took the integrity and excellence. Um, Now this is a company. We don't just provide service. We do provide a service, but it's in making a game. But how do we make a game together? So cooperation is what replaced service there. Um, and the team, I redacted this because the team is constantly shifting. Um, and the final we're not published. We don't have a publisher yet or funding, so I have nobody on the payroll other than, uh, well, I guess I'm not on the payroll either. I was going to say other than myself, um, but once we get funding for this, that'd be great. So I just put a list of different jobs that would be need to be filled. Um, so the idea was to get Paradox to publish it, so I'm not sure that's ever going to happen, but I'll leave that door open. Um, it would be nice. The narrative of the story, I'm not going to read through all of this right now. I will link it, but there is quite a lot going on here throughout the different acts. You can see I'm scrolling through it. I talk about the art style, the music, the sound, the animation. I've already been working with some great sound designers and stuff like that who I think would be perfect for this. And I know some nice artists as well, um, who have been very promising. SFX, I'll probably just be using a Niagara in Unreal Engine. I've been getting better with that. Um, it talks about the controls, technological requirements, target specs, um, what happens when you actually log into the game, going through menu screens, that kind of thing. I've got it all planned. There's a whole flow chart here. What happens during loading screens? When do we have loading screens? Why do we have loading screens? That kind of thing. How does the player control the camera? How does the cinematic combat actually work? Cutscenes, movies, basic intended HUD design here. I mean, I try to make it so there's no overlap between other things. So that, if you bring up everything at once and it all appears, sure, the screen's pretty covered, but nothing's overlapping and messing with it. You can see that this matches the itch.io page with what is developed and shown. Character metrics. These are important so that we know how we are succeeding in delivering a product. Discusses things like movement, combat, dialogue, unique ability here, frenzy. So this is sort of counter to agency actually. Frenzy's when you sort of lose control of your character as a vampire, which is a fun um, uh, ability because normally in Vampire you actually get to choose if you do want to lose control or if you want to take a penalty otherwise. So we'll have systems like that so you still have agency. Now, losing control could be fun in the fact that, if you just see the wild kite character going wild, um, you'll get some new interesting effects, and just the things that they'll do will be quite amusing. And I don't want it to be like you actually lose control of your character for long periods of time. It just, it's like, do you want to let your character kind of go more wild than you normally would? Kind of like a Dark Urge in Baldur's Gate 3, if you're familiar with that. There are times where it's like, wow, the character's kind of losing control. I don't want to feel any more of loss of agency than that. Just really interesting when you frenzy. But this is every character is the Dark Urge because every character is capable of frenzy. There are certain stats you can pad to make it so that it's less likely. Um, Resolve and composure, I believe, are the stats. Also building up, your willpower pool, which I think is just resolve plus composure. So yeah, it is. Um, yeah, make sure you have got plenty of willpower to burn in case you need to avoid that. Um, so there's a bunch of aspects to your character you can choose, advantages and flaws. Um, yeah, I'm not going to read through all this, but it's there's very minute details for what goes into a character in this game. Um, I go over what kind of things we want to focus on in tutorials, since there are many minute details to explain. How this gets to the player, how they understand the lore in the story, what are our standards for that, how the game saves and loads, information about the NPCs, including adversaries and friendlies, how the multiplayer will work. And then I went into things like yeah. So for the multiplayer, uh, I want it to be about 4 players. That's kind of the same as Baldur's Gate 3 ended up doing. And of course, there'll just be a host, and the other players serve as clients. Um, I want it to be as cross platform as possible, but I think this project might end up being Windows only, unfortunately. But I'm hoping for um, maybe if I get enough funding and people on board, we can shoot aim bigger. Um, Monetization model. Um, I'm estimating $40 for this. It's not going to be as big or expansive as Larian's Baldur's Gate 3, but it's going to be fun nonetheless. DLCs. I just threw out some random ideas of what DLC can be. I mean, honestly, this type of game is perfect for expansions, like full-on expansions or DLCs. Like, there's different eras, different places of the world. You can just expand anywhere. Or sequels, starting over with a whole new meta arc. Pretty easy to do because it's a whole expansive world that's richly developed. Um, so yeah, scope includes like defining the minimal viable product, what key features it has, and these are just like bullet points. What extra features, things that I'd like to throw in there. I'm not sure that will be in the final product, but it'd be nice to throw in there. I had a whole production plan for the exact lengths of time that are being estimated for pre-production alpha. Okay, so where are we now? This project is stalled. So it's in a holding pattern in pre-production. Um, I intended to do a Kickstarter, but that's not allowed with Unbound, so I'll have to see. Maybe I'll get help with that. Maybe Unbound will change. Maybe I'll get published, or maybe this game will be in a holding pattern forever. That happens to games, but you get to see, what was developed here. So there's patterns for alpha stage, beta stage. Undefining alpha stage is when everyone is in production and working. So it's full production for pre-production, which is just me trying to gather all this and make it get going. That's what pre-production means. Um, This is going to be longer than 6 months because I am putting a pause on this. We'll get this going again if I get any traction. Then the alpha, I bet, would be about a year. Beta development would be about a year. And then we'll start working on launch details. You're like, wow, only 2 years? Yeah, I think this game could be done in 2 years if I got any support. There's a whole Gantt chart here that I made for the plus months and exactly what features need to be done. That is linked in the document if you want to check it out. Estimates. I mean, these are rough budget estimates. These can like chains and slide, of course. Tons of risks. I mean, especially if I started getting money and, well, it's like, who's to say this is going to work out, right? Well, that's what I do. I make sure this works out. I even gave estimates of how big of a risk certain things are. You can read through that. I've been taking up way so much of your time already. Um, I did some research here when it comes to this type of game, so you will get the details to that in towards the back here, and then like who's going to play this game and pitch details. So please review this document and the attached linked documents, and let me know what you think about my design docs. Thank you. Goodbye.